Okay, universal proxy card. First year, your thoughts on how it went, what you saw, what worked, what didn't work, where this is going, and what boards need to be thinking about in terms of universal proxy card.
I think one of the things that we advised clients was to really take a sharp look at director bios.
Yeah.
Director bios had traditionally been sort of stops on the career journey, right? And then there was an SEC mandated sentence that said, that required you to say, why is this person on the board? And because the sentence was mandated by the SEC, guys like me tended to write it. And that's not what you want. You don't want to be sort of the slowest gazelle on the board of directors. And so we saw a lot of sharpening of bios, a lot of attention paid to precisely why are you the right person to sit on this board at this time. And I'll tell you a story maybe that took this a little bit too far. We had a first-time director who sent in his bio for a public company, and he described himself as the world's leading expert on hydrogen and energy transition. And I thought, maybe, but the odds are certainly against him. So I think within the bounds of reason, take a look at your director bios, take a look and think about why it is that you're the right person to sit on this board at this time in the company's history. And I think that will go a long way to discourage an activist from targeting you with a hostile slate.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I'll just throw something back to you, is companies taking advantage of the opportunity of universal proxy to sharpen their advance notice provisions, yeah, which is a legal question. But in terms of sort of the impact that it had, it was 1 year, and the number of situations that go to a proxy fight is pretty small. So you can't take 1 year as the to predict whether or not it's going to have the impact that we all thought it was. We didn't see a single instance of a 14A activist using universal proxy and having the threat of directors to advance their ESG agenda. We didn't see any of that. A universal proxy lowers the bar for activists to do that. We didn't see a huge change in the victory rate of activists versus dissidents. Activists versus management. The number of proxy fights varies year over year, so you can't really tell. I think what it did do, though, is there was a lot of situations where management had some fear because of universal proxy. Did my mic go off?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. Because of universal proxy, that there was a threat of losing, that there were more settlements. Most proxy fights, threatened proxy fights, end up in settlements, but I think this year was probably a higher number. But at the end of the day, it's just a voting instrument. Shareholders still have to make a decision: do they want to support the activist or do they not? It's very rare that institutions go down, look at both slates, and kind of come with a dream team of which was the major fear that shareholders had. The activists still had to make a case that the current board wasn't, or the company wasn't performing well. They had a better plan, and so shareholders should support them. We did not see situations where shareholders bypassed that test and went straight to, all right, let's figure out, is there a kind of the pale male that could be replaced by a more exciting, diverse candidate, and we just didn't see a lot of that.
I think one of the reasons for what Paul's describing there, that shareholders and even the proxy advisors didn't go off script on that, is the collective action problem from the shareholder perspective. You aren't going to get anybody off the board unless you concentrate a lot of withhold votes on that individual. The activists always used to do this, right? Whether it was one proxy card or two, the activists would say, these are the ones I'm targeting, and that's where the arena of competition would be defined. ISS is not doing that. It's just a nightmare for them to go through. If you're truly going to do a proxy access analysis, you have to look at everybody on the board, whether they're targeted or not, and then everybody on the dissident slate. We did this once with Canadian Pacific when I was at ISS, and the analysis on prong 2, which is usually really short. Prong 1 is there a compelling case for change? Prong 2 is, if there is, which nominees are more likely to get you there? That analysis of the of all the candidates was longer than the analysis of prong one. And usually it's just a fairly brief kind of thing there. ISS doesn't want to get into that. If ISS, which spends all of its daytime doing that, doesn't want to, no shareholder wants to as well. I think that's fundamentally it. The thing I want to say, though, and this circles back to where Clint got started, is the thing that matters most is once an activist shows up, what's your bio say? You can revise it after that, but there's a track record of here's what it was in last year's proxy, here's what it is now. Oh my God, this guy suddenly got religion and he's smart. The things you need to say are not where you were, but why that matters to the company. And you need to look at who you are, but also this company at this moment in its lifespan, what does it actually truly need and why? So I have a background in finance before I did all this kind of stuff. There's probably a lot of people on any board who have a background in finance. What was it specifically about the type of corporate finance I did? I was at a Fortune 5 company at that point with global operations, but I personally did an awful lot of work with, I think there were 52 sites across the US that we specifically worked at. You can get into these kinds of things and all of a sudden it begins to make sense. It's hard to compact that into a bio, but that's the kind of analysis you need, is what does the company need and how am I the solution to it? I'll give you a really good example of this. A local one, Huntsman, this was before Universal Proxy came in 2 years ago, or 2022, had a proxy fight, and one of the directors, who turns out to be a good director, but she's also the longest serving, maybe a decade at that point, Huntsman is a specialty chemicals manufacturer. She is a cancer scientist. She runs something called the Huntsman Cancer Foundation, which just makes it look like there's related party transactions, which is of course what the activist was arguing about. And in her bio, which might originally have been written by lawyers but was rewritten by junior people at a PR firm, they said the reason she's on the board is because she understands as a scientist a lot about chemistry, which is not why she's on the board. She was clearly going to get voted off because if you think about it, not from your perspective, but perspective of somebody sitting at Fidelity or even at ISS, they aren't going to spend a lot of time going beyond what's provided in the proxy itself about this person. They would have just seen related party, 10 years, no obvious relevance to the company. The CEO and the general counsel of Huntsman took that to heart, went back, rewrote it. What came back was she is responsible for an organization with $1 billion a year in revenue, $250 million in R&D, which is what the activist was arguing was unnecessary. And then a number of other things that followed from that. It's the single best example, and I didn't write it, they did. It's the single best example I've seen of transforming the bio into something that tells every investor why she's on the board. ISS had no problem recommending for her. And before that, they would have recommended against her, not because she's a bad person, but because the only thing they had is the bio. So let me leave you with this. I have a doctorate. I have an MBA in finance. I was a divisional CFO for $12 billion in revenue. I have a lot of years working on the shareholder side as a proxy advisor, looking at companies, including in proxy fights. If there is a proxy fight for your seat at whatever company you're at, I am a really good candidate, and I don't care what that company is, and I don't care who you are. The first question is, does anybody in this room believe I'm a better candidate to be that director than you are? And the answer is no. It should be no. I mean, I don't know any of you, and frankly, you do, so you should have a better idea of it. The next question is the most important one. How do your shareholders know that? Because the only thing they're going to see is the bio in the proxy statement. So it's got to be written really well, and it's got to be written by you, or closely overseen by you. The second thing is, what are the other touch points throughout the year? Because that's only one of them, and the proxy comes out once a year. Are there other ways in which shareholders can see this person is wise, has made good decisions on the board? Ultimately, other than if you're a hedge fund, they don't want to replace directors. What they want to know is that they can trust this board is asking the right questions and making the right decisions and meeting shareholders who will never be in. And if they're confident about that, they will support them to the end. There are a few boards that are bellwethers of this. Berkshire Hathaway, if you went after Warren Buffett and said he's been on too long or he shouldn't be chair and CEO, you'd be tarred and feathered and run out of town because people believe in that board. It's not the only board, but it's an example of that. When you're looking at your bio and then the other bios of those around you on those boards, you need to answer that question for yourself. How do the shareholders know from this and from anything else that's out there that I'm a director they want to keep on this board? I think that's fundamentally the news from the first year of Proxy Access. I don't know what it will be in a couple of years. I do think we're going to see some transcendently superfluous campaigns. But I think that there's a lot you can do about it now, and then you just pay attention to it year after year, and I think that helps.
we're recommending this year that you all add to your bios, I'm the best director on this board.
We'll remember that. As we get laughed out of the boardroom. Okay.